Lovely. Thank you so much, Amy, and welcome to everyone. It's really, as I just said earlier, for those who didn't quite see me, weren't quite joined at the time, it's so nice to see some familiar names. And for all of you who will be watching this not live, because you're busy doing other things at the moment, really welcome, huge welcome to you guys as well. But the biggest welcome, obviously, goes to Kristy-Jo Hockaday, who I'm so pleased you've joined us today. It's fantastic. And I think we're trying really hard to get this kind of really diverse cross-section, because I was getting a bit bored of Harrier pilots. So Amy said, oh, I've got this woman called Kristy. I was like, oh, brilliant, brilliant, not a Harrier pilot, yes. And I think for me, Kristy, and we'll talk about it later, but I think it's really, your story is really interesting because it's that, and I imagine quite a lot of other people who are on the call might empathise as well, but it's around joining the Air Force at a really young age, having a really interesting career, doing so many different kind of roles around the world, and then having a second career after that, which is what you're doing at the moment. So I think for me, it's really, it's fantastic to talk about those kind of things. And maybe we could start with your motivations, because I think you joined the Air Force when you were 16, is that right?
Yeah, so I was a bit lost, as a lot of teenagers are. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Wanted to be a journalist, wanted to be a doctor, wanted to do all these different things. And then I was a prefect at school, and the RAF came in for Careers Day. And I got talking to the corporal, he was an armourer, and he was saying, there's all these opportunities that can be in front of you. And then he mentioned, you got paid? And I was like, 16 years old, I'll get paid? I'll have a go. And my family were a bit like, really? You're going to leave home at 16 and you're going to go off? I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. And I was at Manchester Piccadilly Station. I was on the train, and my parents remind me of it quite a lot. I had a big grin on my face, smiling as the train pulled off, and the family were all crying at the side. Like, oh, she's 16, she's such a baby, she's gone. And I was just ready for this adventure. And I went right.
And you hadn't had any previous experience then so you hadn't been a cadet, you hadn't done anything. So how did you did you think that you needed to prepare yourself for going off to basic training, or did you just kind of wave goodbye and see what happened?
Yeah, I thought I'd blag it. I thought I'll just go and I'll just blag it. And I got a shock. I got an absolute shock within the first few weeks, and I phoned home and I was like, I'm coming home, I can't do this. I was crying to my mum. And because I was so young, of course, my mum had to sign over parental responsibility to the Air Force. So they couldn't release me without my mum signing back. And I didn't know that they'd already had this conversation, the sergeant, with my mum. And they took me into an office, and I was crying. I said, I'm leaving, I'm going. And they phoned my mum on loudspeaker, and they'd already prepared her. And she said, I'm not signing back for you, you have to stay. And I was like, what? My whole world just ended there. And then I was like, my mum doesn't want me back. She's like, no, your bedroom's gone. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you're not coming back. So that's really, really mixed emotions. And the sergeant sat down and counselled me through it and stuff. He said, look, you're just going to have to give this a go. If you get to the end of basic training, then you can leave. So I was like, fine. So I did. I gave it my all. And I got reflighted a couple of times. One for my attitude and one because I couldn't iron. But yeah, so then obviously my mum told me at the end of basic training, she's like, I knew all along, I just wanted you to give it a go.
So did you have a few weeks of not really liking your mum very much?
Yeah.
After that? Tricky. Must be so difficult for her to have done that when you can't even say my words, but when she sees her young daughter on the phone in a bit of an emotional state, and she's got to dig deep and go, no, be really strong.
Yeah, it was. And she talks about it now. And she says, it's my fault that you've had this wonderful career. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have had it. So she's taking all the glory now. A bit like when I got my degree.
So what was it around, what was it that you found most particularly hard to come to terms with? What was the greatest shocks, apart from the ironing?
I think just this long days of structure, and just, I was at school beforehand, and come 3 o'clock, I was able to go home and, I was revising for my GCSEs, or doing what I wanted at my own pace, where all of a sudden it was this, really, really rigid structure, and I had to stick to it. And my friends at home were doing, you know, they were going off to college and they were telling me all these wonderful things about college, and they were going to the pub at lunchtime playing snooker, and, you know, what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm polishing my shoes again because they're not good enough, or I'm ironing, I'm doing this. And, you know, we weren't even allowed to go to the shop and buy sweets. And then I had to wear this big, ridiculous badge to show that I was under 18 so that nobody would serve me alcohol. So it was just a complete culture shock. But once I got through the basic training, and then I got a bit more sort of responsibility when I got to trade training, it was completely different.
So tell us a little bit then about trade training and kind of what you really enjoyed about that.
So it was kind of like being at college, but in a uniform. So we'd go down, we'd have our lessons, and we'd still do military skills throughout as well. So we'd still have like block inspections, room inspections, but we were able to have quilts instead of, you know, blankets and bed packs. We were able to go home at weekends. On an evening, we could do, you know, as we wished. If we chose to revise, that was up to us. It was about that bit more independence and that bit more freedom.
And do you think that the combination of basic training and then your trade training, did you kind of learn new things about yourself during that process, do you think?
Yeah, I learned that, I mean, my friends will laugh because I do still try and blag a lot of things, but I learned that I just couldn't blag life. You know, I had to commit to things, and I had to put 100% into things. It wasn't just going to happen. I had to make things happen. But also, by putting the effort in, the rewards came back. So my life became so much easier when I did play the game, when I did stick to the rules and I started, you know, doing what I was told to do the first time. Life became easier, and the rewards started coming then, and, you know, the opportunities to do things. And of course, it was a really hot summer. It was back in the summer of '99, and we had a heat wave, and there was asbestos in the building. So we went on to Cyprus hours. So come 1 o'clock, we were all, you know, out the building and able to do what we want. And it was a great summer. It was like fantastic.
Sounds amazing. Now, I know that there's a number of you on this call who've been in the Air Force, and you've gone through either similar training or slightly different training. And you know, I think it would be a really nice opportunity. I know that for security reasons we can't have your cameras on and you can't talk and stuff, but I would love it if you would perhaps, if you felt like it, share, you know, use the group chat and share your own experiences about training, because I think it'd be really nice to kind of share that with the rest of the group as well. If you have any particular moments that you remember, whether you found it hard, whether you found some really low points, like Kristy has just mentioned when her mum said she didn't want her anymore, through to any high points as well. And for you, Kristy, were there some, do you remember some kind of, obviously, so there's no alcohol related tales because you're under 16, I'm sure. But are there any other kind of high points that you really remember from either basic or your trade training, apart from the fact that you got knocked off at 1 o'clock?
Just that fantastic feeling of being part of a group, and just if you needed a hug, there was someone to give you a hug. And we had our like 4-man room during PERS admin training, and there's the 4 girls of us, and 2 of us in there were under 18. And we were just so looked after, and, you know, the love of these people, we'd only known them minutes, you know, really on the lifespan, but you were just so close, and you told each other everything. And yeah, it was just fab, just that feeling of belonging. All of a sudden, I'd gone from being this teenager who was like just wandering around, like thinking, well, what am I going to do in life, to just belonging and being part of a group. And it was, I was looking back now, I was so naive as well, so naive. And if I hadn't have had those strong influences around me, life could have been a lot more different.
Yeah.
But they helped influence, and they helped keep me on track. For example, my first posting up at RAF Kinloss, when I got my posting order, you know, I was at Halton in Buckinghamshire, and I got this thing that said RAF Kinloss, Inverness, and I was like, oh, where's Inverness? Never even heard of it. And then didn't really hit me until I got on this train, and it wouldn't be for 16 hours till I arrived at my destination. It was just, I was just so naive to the world, so naive, but thought I knew it all.
How old were you then by the time you arrived, when your first posting, when you arrived at your first posting?
So I just turned 17 when I got to RAF Kinloss.
Okay. And still one of the very youngest ones on the station then.
Yeah, and the chief clerk, you know, on my 18th birthday, pulled me into the office and kind of, you know, just put his hands down and he went, "I'm so pleased that you're 18 now. Like, I'm not responsible for you anymore." Yeah, it was fantastic. But again, so many strong characters and such good influences. We were in a barrack block, and you only had your little tiny room, and everything else was shared. So your kitchens were shared, your bathrooms were shared. So you could go to the toilet or go to the shower and bump into somebody and have a chat. And I just received, and I still remember it to this day, really, really good life advice. Things that people probably, they were drunk, I wasn't because I was 17. The things that they were saying, that they probably just thought were drunken comments, but actually really helped me in life.
And how did you find it? Did you find that transition from training to actually a proper job? Did you find that seamless, or was that a challenge in a different way?
Being 17, my ego sort of went from being told what to do all the time, so, "Ooh, check me out, I'm an LAC, I can do what I want." And of course, it was back in 99, so things are very different structure. I was put in my place quite a lot by seniors. One example, a navigator came in, I was working in accounts, and he started shouting at me because I'd give him a cash advance. But because I wasn't concentrating, I didn't pay him £500 cash advance, I'd given him 5p. So he was, you know, understandably quite angry about this. So he was shouting and what have you. And the chief clerk came out and I thought, "Oh, I've got my back up now. The chief clerk's behind me." So I just said, "Hey, I don't come down that squadron and tell you how to fly an aeroplane. Don't come in here and tell me how to do accounts." Yeah. I learned very quickly not to go off.
So also good life lessons, albeit not perhaps feeling as positive at the time.
Yeah, but I thought I was like the big I am because I was an LAC, and
of course,
you know,
yeah.
you get those rank slides on, and you're not the bottom of the pond anymore. And yeah.
And how did you find the social life? Obviously, it was different to what you'd experienced on training. But said you're in a relatively big station.
Yeah. So I quickly became a member of the rugby club, and it was like having all these big brothers. They were so protective, and I think they just saw me as this little dot of a teenager, and they just looked after me so well. You know, if any boys tried to push the luck or step over the line, they were quickly told, you know, "She's one of ours, you don't treat her like that." And they just looked after me. And yeah, my 18th birthday was in the rugby club. It was I can still remember the party, and I've got the pictures. It was really good. The social side of things were fantastic. The sports were fantastic. So we had ski bus on a Wednesday. We were able to go to the Cairngorms. I was lucky enough to go to California to learn how to ski for 3 weeks, to get my NATO bronze. So that then I was able to do some ice training on the Cairngorms. So sporting opportunities were just there just to embrace and just take them. So I did.
And at that point, had you sort of started realising? Maybe it didn't, but I know, you know, from personal experience and from others' experience, that perhaps, you know, you left home age 16 with a really tight, close-knit group of friends in Manchester. You went off to this whole other world, and you start creating a life there. Did you start finding that, you know, those close friends that you'd had in Manchester, you were a bit alien now in terms of the experiences you had? And how did you deal with that?
I don't think it hit me at the time. It kind of hits me now. So when I see friends having reunions and I see friends having nights out, and I think I've missed out on that because I didn't go to college with everybody from school, and I didn't have those bonds. When my first tour in the Falklands, you know, school friends were writing, and I was writing to my English teacher. You know, I was still that young and that fresh from school, and I was like, "Oh, that lesson that we did in English, I can relate to that because the penguins," and blah, blah. You know, and it's now that I look back and I think I've missed out on that, and I'm lucky that I have got some friends still from school. You know, my best friend Tammy, I can't get rid of her. I've tried. I know she's watching. You know, she's full of confidence in me. She said it'd be about 3 minutes before I swore or gave away some sort of official secret today, so I'm doing well.
You did caution that to me. Don't let me say anything that's secret. I was like, I'll try.
But yeah, so it was strange watching my friends move on with their lives in a different direction. So when I got to 18 and they were going off to uni, you know, on my 18th birthday, I was given 2 signals. The first one to say I was going to the Falklands because I was old enough. And the second one, so it wasn't a signal, it was a memo, was to say I was now able to carry a live armed weapon, so I was doing guard duty, you know. Very different to what my friends were experiencing.
So tell us about the Falklands, because I'm sure that not everyone on this call will have visited or been posted out there. And obviously we've heard a lot about what it's like. I've never been there. I'd be fascinated to know what your kind of first impressions were. So you arrived there just after your 18th birthday?
Yeah, so I was almost 19. Yeah, no, sorry, I just turned 19.
Okay.
Just turned 19 by the time I got there because I needed to learn how to drive and things, which the Air Force paid for, which was great. So I arrived in the Falklands after a very long two flights, stopping at Ascension on the way, and it was just bleak. It was just bleak, and I was like, where am I? You know, all my friends are going to Ayia Napa and to Faliraki, and here I am for the summer. And of course it was the Falklands winter, so it was freezing cold. But again, I just embraced every opportunity. So I travelled around the islands. I used to babysit. So I would babysit for some of the officers that were down there accompanied, and my payment would be a bath and £20. So, you know, it was great having a bath because there wasn't any baths at Biffy where I was. And then the money, that £20, that would be my beer money for the week, which meant I didn't spend any of my earnings, any of my salary. It was just completely untouched whilst I was down there, which was fantastic as a 19-year-old. And also being female, I did get a lot of opportunities down there. You know, I did get invited out quite a lot on different flights. I went out on the helicopters, went out on the VC-10s, went out on the Hercs. And I think because I had no filter and I used to say silly things, people saw me as a bit of entertainment as well, so they would take me out on long flights.
Some additional value.
Yeah, you know, comedy value. But yeah, the Falklands, it was fab. In hindsight, if I'd go back now, it would be very different. I would make more of the opportunities. I would explore Stanley a little bit more, look at some of the history of it. But I was 19.
Sure, you wanted a good time.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a laugh, save some money. You know, I had a shotgun wedding down there, which was quite funny.
You what?
A shotgun wedding.
Okay.
So I didn't really get married, but I thought I'd got married because I'd told a little bit of a porky pie to the accommodation officer, saying that I was pregnant so that I could get a single room. So the accommodation officer told the RSM of my boyfriend, who happened to be down there for the same 4 months.
Okay.
So they then decided to wind me up for telling porky pies and teach me a lesson. And everybody was in on it. The padre was in on it. And they staged this false wedding where they held an SA-80 to my head and made me walk down the aisle. Yeah.
That's a story I didn't expect to hear today, Kristy.
Yeah. It was, looking back, it was funny. It was character building.
How did your mother feel about this?
Well, she didn't know.
Revenge for disowning you 3 years previously.
Yeah, my parents obviously didn't know. Because then we didn't have Facebook or Insta or Snapchat or anything like that. You know, we didn't even have mobile phones, most of us. So yeah, we used to get up to all kinds of things that I'm pleased that we didn't have social media. So yeah, but yeah, that was funny. So I didn't really get married, but it was a good party afterwards.
And when did you find out that you weren't married? Just out of interest. Sorry, I know we're supposed to be talking about the Air Force, but it's such a great story. I can't help keep asking questions about it.
So I think it was the point where I was trying to sign my name with a lot of tears. And Ben as well, he was not best pleased about the situation.
Because he was oblivious to it.
Yeah. Right. So then they were like, wind up, wait. And they all started partying. It took me about 5 minutes to realise the shock of.
I'd love to know, anyone else on this conversation today as well. You know, I said, you know, do share your experiences about training, because I would love to hear what everyone else kind of went through and some of their kind of high and low points. But honestly, if you've got any stories to rival that one of Kristy, please put them on the group chat if you're happy for us to share them, because wow, that's pretty epic. So 4 months in the Falklands then, were you homesick, apart from when you thought you'd been forced into marriage against your own will?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all. I think because every day just goes so quickly. And I was working in HQB and I was, again, young, naive, but I had a laugh, and a lot of the time the laugh was at my expense. But I just rolled with it, and you know, I got staple gunned to a notice board by my uniform, and all the seniors had walked past and just laugh at me, and I got shrink wrapped to the conference table. So when the one star came in with, you know, all of his group, there I was, starfished on the conference table, like, hi sir. You know, I had to be cut off, and it was a laugh. It was just so funny. I just enjoyed it so much, and I didn't mind being like the brunt of the laughs, because I thought they were funny.
And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Those sort of things are funny as long as you're thinking that they're funny too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they're not, they could be construed as bullying. But as long as you're a willing participant in the you know, in the stunts, then that's that, and the hijinks, that's a kind of different story.
Yeah. That's, and it is a difference between the hijinks and, you know, there's stories that come out about the Falklands and stuff that obviously don't agree with. But my personal experience of it was fun, and it was, and the lads knew that if it got to the point where I wasn't happy, it would have stopped.
Yeah. Cool. So what happened after the Falklands then? Because you've had quite a number of different interesting postings after that.
So after the Falklands, I went to Northern Ireland, which
so
again,
was that a really different experience? You come straight from the Falklands, which felt a bit dislocated from home, and you know, anything kind of, not anything went, but do you know what I mean? How was that a bit of a culture shock?
Yeah, but it was easier to get home because I could fly from work. I could fly from the international airport straight into Manchester. So I was actually getting home more than when I was in North Scotland. And of course, we used to get travel warrants and extra pay to get you home. So that wasn't too bad. And my family could come out. So mum came out, you know, friends came out. I had my 21st birthday in Northern Ireland in the NAFI, which was fab. And it was, Northern Ireland was very different work-wise, like the office environment, PSF, was very different to the PSF up at Kinloss.
In what way was it different, Kristy?
So we had the army attached to us, whereas at Kinloss we'd just been the Air Force. So there was different rules, like different things to get your head around. Of course, you didn't have the freedom where you could just nip to Tesco's. We had to do extra training. We had to experience things over there that we wouldn't have experienced. So, for example, I was on call out in Kinloss and there was a flood and I had to go sandbagging. When I was on call out in Northern Ireland, it was for the fireman strikes. So I was then deployed, you know, for like months on end down to Bangor, living in a TA centre, covering the fireman strikes, at kind of 24 hours notice. So it was very different. Again, a big culture shock getting my head around the tri-service. My first, I probably shouldn't share this, but never mind. My first example.
You can do anyway.
Yeah, of Sergeant Major. So I'd never spoken to a Sergeant Major, never had real dealings with, you know, anybody high up in the army before. And this Sergeant Major phoned me up and he said, all right, you're coming on the fire strikes, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to address him correctly and I wanted to be polite. So I was thinking, what do I call a Sergeant Major? So I was like, well, is he a sergeant? Or is he a major? So is he sir? So as he finished, I went, oh, thanks very much, Sarge Marge. I'll see you soon. And he went, pardon? I said, thank you, Sarge Marge. And he's like, Sarge Marge, who are you talking to? I was like, you, Sarge Marge? Me thinking that I was being polite. Of course, he took massive offence. And then when I turned up to the strikes, everyone else had a bourbon and I had a pulley trolley and my hair in pigtails. Yeah, we didn't get on at all. But yeah, so I know now it's not Sarge Marge.
Note to everyone.
Yeah.
So other overseas postings you did were you were in Al-Udeid, you were in Basra, is that right?
Yeah, so when I came to the end of my tour in Northern Ireland, that's when Telic kicked off. So I was posted to Honington, and a good friend of mine was posted to Honington as well, because I worked in PSF, and because we had dream sheets back in the day where you'd put on your 3 top postings before JPA. So I put her down as the same as what I'd got, because I got Honington, so she got Honington, even though she hadn't actually written that on a dream sheet.
Oh gosh, so you fixed her dream sheet for her?
Yeah.
She was chuffed.
Yeah, she enjoyed it. So got to Honington, and as Christmas approached, it was very much right, we're getting you ready, you're going. And I went out there at the same time as 2 Squadron RAF Regiment who were at Honington, so I knew a lot of people, which was really good. And the first 2 months, great. A lot of experiences that I'd never had before. And after 2 months was when Piers Morgan decided to write some stuff in the media about British troops, and it changed. The whole atmosphere changed. We were constantly being attacked. The locals that had been working with us didn't trust us anymore. You know, that relationship that we'd built up, it was hard to try and get that to continue. I'd always been welcomed into the local area. The kids, you know, they'd only ever seen a blonde female on you know, books. They didn't have TVs, so they just wanted to touch my hair all the time. And with an interpreter, you know, I'd sit and I'd play with the children and plait hair, and I was really, really welcomed by the elders and into the villages. But towards the end of the tour, that did change, and it was very different. But yeah, again, a life experience.
Absolutely, and one that few other people share, apart from some of the people on this call, obviously. But,
yeah. So that really, for me, put things into perspective. Really put things into perspective. Didn't really know much about other cultures, which is strange, really, growing up, you know, where I did. But yeah, it really opened my eyes to other cultures, other religions, you know, differences in people and people's attitudes towards things.
And again, something that's helped you kind of in your subsequent career, I imagine, those kind of
experiences. So now I'm an RE teacher now, and you know, part of the GCSE is peace and conflict. So when it gets to that point, I can talk about my experiences with the kids, and you know, they ask questions, and it really gives them that hook, especially the teenage boys. You know, there's that hook there, and they want to know more, and they don't realise that they're actually covering GCSE topic. They just think I'm waffling on at them, and they're getting a bit of a chat. But yeah, it's
And did it change how you felt about being in the Air Force?
No, it kind of made me feel like this was my purpose in the Air Force. You know, the Air Force isn't just to have a good time and do all these sports. You know, this is why we exist. Because the Falklands, you know, I was born during the Falklands War. So when I went to the Falklands, there was no conflict there. There was nothing. Northern Ireland, there was little bits, but we were quite protected from it. And, you know, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as experiences that other people have had, probably in the 90s and the 80s. So for me, this was the first real sense of why we have the military, why we need people to defend the air.
Sounds like you've grown up a bit as well by then.
Yeah, I had definitely grown up. Not quite.
So that was Basra, and then tell us about Al-Udeid. Was that separate? You went there?
Yes, that was a couple of years later.
Okay.
So Al-Udeid was fab. I loved Al-Udeid. Again, worked with some amazing people. Fantastic experience. Very different, like, living conditions to what we were in Basra. Although we were still in tents, you know, this time instead of having the coffin type beds, we had beds. You know, it was very, very different experience. We were able to go into Doha.
Okay.
So things were different again.
And what was your role like there, Kristy? Was it a PSF related role at that point?
So my role was I can't remember what my job title was now, but I used to like check people in, if you like. So the movers would do the movement side of it, but then I'd like be in the VIP lounge. So I'd do people's arrivals and go through the arrivals briefs. So there was myself, I was an SAC, and there was a sergeant. You know, we'd do all that kind of thing, make sure that people had their natal travel orders and their passports and the visas, and because the Americans controlled the camp.
And you talked a little bit earlier about the culture shock in Northern Ireland of working with the army. Obviously, Basra Al Udeid, you're certainly working with other nations as well. How did you find that?
Strange. We used to, even though I was an SAC, we used to tell the Americans I was a sergeant because they wouldn't recognise an SAC.
Okay.
You know, if I asked them to do something, it was like, no. Whereas of course in the Air Force, you look at your team, and sometimes your SACs are the experts on things. Yeah. But the Americans couldn't recognise that. So we did used to tell porcupines and tell them I was a sergeant sometimes, just so that they would, you know, respond to what I was saying. I had a fantastic tour out there socially. I actually organised a bin bag fashion show.
Okay.
Which I loved. And when I came back on R&R, I got loads of different carrier bags, and I went to Selfridges and I went to all these different shops, and I asked them to sponsor an outfit like with their carrier bags. And then when I got back, the sergeant and I and a few of us, we got together and we made all these outfits, and then we put on a fashion show to raise money for Manchester Children's Hospital.
Oh, amazing. I hope there was aircon though. I can't imagine being covered in wearing a bunch of plastic and LUD. Quite warm.
It was
sounds
really
amazing.
It was really, really good. And Sir Baz, who's now, of course, your leader.
President.
Yes, yep. President of RAFA. He actually awarded me an AOC's commendation.
Did he?
For that,
it was well deserved. So you worked with Sir Baz out in, what was Sir Baz doing when you were working with him?
So he was in charge of the British troops over there.
Out there.
Yeah, so we had Sir Baz North, and we had Wing Commander South, Alex South. So we had North and South, which used to make me chuckle.
Nice.
So, but yeah, and I'd worked for Alex South previously as well, so I knew him. But yeah, it was a really good tour, and I came back from there on promotion.
Okay.
But although I was in charge of like doing the visas and making sure everybody was checked in and what have you, I hadn't been checked in properly. So when I tried to fly back Civvy Air, because I needed to go to Kuwait to do something, so when I tried to fly back Civvy Air, I got arrested at Doha because I was an illegal immigrant.
Oh no, what happened?
Well, it got to the point where the lady got the gloves, and I was just a bit, so I was like, no, this can't happen, you know, this is not happening. And the RMPs turned up just then, and I was like, oh. And
rescued in the nick of time.
Yeah, they explained everything, and I was able to fly on to Kuwait. But yeah, nothing ever straightforward in my world.
So when you came back home, where did you were on promotion, so you're now corporal, where were you posted to?
I went to Northwood.
Oh wow, okay.
NATO, down in the bunker, which again was very different. I'd gone from being 100 mile an hour in PSFs and previous job roles, constant busy, to suddenly, you know, I was one of many, and my job after an hour had nothing to do all day. It's really, really strange. So
what was your role there?
So I wasn't a chief clerk. I was at the junior NCO in charge of a few clerks within a top secret cell. So it was, apart from having a good look through the files, there was nothing else interesting to do really. So I got myself moved quite quickly. I mean, being in London was great, but yeah. I got myself moved quite quickly up to the careers office.
Okay, interesting. So this is your first sort of working with young people?
Yeah, so I went up to the careers office in Manchester, which again was a fantastic job role, but I found it really lonely.
Okay.
I was suddenly in an apartment, even though I was in Manchester, so I was back home. I was in an apartment in the city centre. You know, I wasn't in a barrack block, didn't have everybody around me. Everybody else in the office was married, so they were going home, you know, rightly so, to their families. And yeah, it was was a bit strange.
How old were you by that point, Kristy?
20.
Sorry to ask you indelicate questions. So essentially, you've been used from the age of 16 to be living with, you know, all your mates and everyone you work with in a barrack block, both in the UK and abroad. And I guess, you know, 9 years of that, and suddenly I can understand why that might feel a bit like you've lost all your family around you.
Yeah, and I did become friends with like some of my neighbours, some of the girls there. But I'm still friends with them now, and they're fantastic bunch of girls, but they never really got it. They only understood what I told them, but they never really got it.
They're not experienced it themselves.
Yeah, and it was a bit like, oh, she is waffling about the Air Force again, you know. But and then I met Stephen, which is my husband. So after working with young people in the careers office, I then got a posting up to Catterick on an exchange tour. So I was working at MDHU at the hospital in Northallerton.
Okay.
Part of Catterick, which again was fab. So I did like accountancy.
Okay.
And then I was doing the bookkeeping. But yeah, really good experience there.
And again, working with the army more.
Yeah, well, working sort of completely army. The only other RAF was an MT driver.
Oh,
so
wow,
some of the doctors and the nurses that we were looking after, they were Air Force, but of course you didn't see them because they were in the clinics or they were on the wards. So I had an MT driver who I'm still friends with now. So, and he's actually a policeman in my local area. So I saw him arresting someone the other day, and I thought I was going to get arrested because I kept driving past. But I did. He said me in Aldi, he's like, you're not supposed to do that.
And then your final tour was at Valley. Had you been promoted again? Did you get promoted again?
Yeah, so the good thing about working with the army is they let me write my own report. So obviously I was.
We take some of this with a pinch of salt, Kristy.
So when I actually got told, because I was supposed to be going to Portugal, to Lisbon, working in the embassy.
Oh, wow.
And I phoned up and I said, look, I've not had my joining instructions yet. And the drafter says, well, no, it's cancelled. I was like, well, why? Why is it no one's cancelled? No one's told me. This is because you're promoted. I was like, pardon? He said, because you've got your third. I was like, okay. So I put the phone down and I phoned him back and I went, my name's Kristy-Jo Hockaday. You have got the right person. And he was like, yes, it's definitely you. Okay. So it was a shock because I'd spent quite a long time as an SAC because I was just making the most of everything. And then I sort of had a bit of an epiphany where I was like, right, I need to knuckle down now. And my career needs to get started. And that's when I got myself promoted to corporal. And then very quickly from corporal promoted to sergeant. It was a bit of a shock. It's like, wow. And then I went off to Valley, which was a bit like the Falkland Islands, really.
And you were in charge of the estates, is that right there?
Yeah, so I was senior NCO estates there.
Yeah.
So working with them.
So what did that involve?
So working with Carillion.
Okay.
To do the jobs, working for the squadron leader, and again working for Wing Commander South.
Stalking him.
Yes, following him around. And yeah, it was again strange because this time I was working with mainly civvies. So I wanted a flying unit. I've been saying for a long time I wanted to go back on a flying unit. Got a flying unit, but I was working mostly civvies. So again, that was strange. But I fell pregnant. I'd been there about 9-10 months when I fell pregnant, and decided to come out on maternity.
And that was the decision because you wanted to make sure you could kind of keep your family together at that point. Yeah,
because my husband's civilian and he wouldn't leave Durham. And he'd always been quite honest from the start that I would be the one that travelled and he would stay at home. So when it was time to have a family, I said, you know,
that must have been a really difficult decision for you. And I think there's probably some other people on the call that can empathise with that, having to make that decision.
Yeah, it was. I think if I'd have been on a couple of RAF units prior to that, it would have been harder. But because I'd been with the army and at a careers office, it's almost as if it was natural
So you're sort of weaning yourself off the Air Force a bit from your tours.
You know, I wasn't as dependent.
But were you still heavily involved in sport at that point, or had that sort of diminished as well a bit? So I know when you started, you said rugby and winter sports and.
Yeah, so I was never very good at any sports, but I would have a go. So I was lucky that because I would have a go at things, you know, I ended up going to AFSEM playing hockey, for example. I can't even play hockey, but I would have a go. Yeah. So I'd always had a go. I'd never been gifted at anything sports-wise, but I was happy to make up numbers. But of course, getting older and not really knowing the rules of what I was doing, my body just took so many knocks, you know, from broken arms, broken shoulders, dislocated knees over the years. You know, it was one, and I was always one of those that if somebody said, you can't do that, I'd go and do it. So when I was in the careers office, we were talking about a marathon, and one of the lads went, you can't do that. So the next year I did the London Marathon. Now notice I say I did the London Marathon, I don't say I ran the London Marathon. Yeah, it took me a while, but I finished, and I beat Peter Andre.
Walk, run. Oh, well, impressive. Good stat to have. So tell me, you made the decision to leave the Air Force then, and then tell me about how your career then what did you decide to do? How did you decide to kind of move into the civilian world? So
I decided to be a beauty therapist.
Okay.
And I was terrible.
Okay.
So I wasn't great at it. I did all the courses. I used all my resettlement money. I did everything. I even bought a sunbed shop. And then at the last minute, I thought, what am I doing? I'm rubbish at this. So spoke to a solicitor, pulled out, lost a bit of money, pulled out of that, and then thought, right, what am I going to do? So I've got a couple of jobs doing admin, office manager type roles around Durham. And then I was going to night school, and then I was completing a business degree. And one of the girls, we were doing critical path analysis, and she just couldn't get her head around it. And I sat down with her and I explained it, and the tutor went, you should be a teacher. And I was like, do you think so? And then that's how, set the ball rolling. And then a friend of mine mentioned Troops to Teachers, where this scholarship scheme, where you could go through that way. So I applied. I was pregnant again, so I applied, and within, I had little man. Within a few months, I was in a school.
Amazing. And that's what you're doing now?
Yes, that's me now.
And you were telling us earlier that you're, so it's RE and history that you teach?
So I'm an RE specialist at St Hilda's in Hartlepool. Okay. I have to give them a big shout out. And this, the way it works for teaching, sometimes on your timetable you might have spare hours. So you as teachers, we can be expected to teach anything. So history this year I've got on my timetable as well, which is quite good because I like talking about the military history. So within school, whenever it's Remembrance Day, I always do the collective worship for remembrance. And we are a community school. We've got a very community feel. So the local veterans, like the Breakfast Club, we invite those in for Remembrance Day. Last year we had the standards again in the assembly, and the kids really reacted to that. And then they can talk to me in class about the military, or sometimes just in the playground or in the corridors.
What do you think in terms of your experience and the skills you learnt in the Air Force? What do you think of those that you kind of apply now in your teaching role?
So resilience, not everything's going to happen the first time. I didn't walk into that classroom and I was able to teach. I had to build on it, and I had to look at some of the stronger teachers, look at their leadership skills. I was really, really lucky. My mentor at my first school at Ferry Hill was fantastic. She was a phenomenal teacher. And I was just like a sponge. I just tried to take everything away from her that I could. And then moving on to the school where I am now, again, some fantastic teachers, some fantastic role models. I'm still learning off them and taking best bits of practice and being able to, say I'm not an expert. So the Air Force teaches you that, because you're not always an expert. As a sergeant, you can ask your corporals things, you can ask your peers things, So it's having the confidence to do that. Some people won't do that. I found that in the civvy world, that some people think that their job role, if they don't know it, then they failed. But, you know, the Air Force has given me the confidence to be able to ask the questions, to be able to do that, to be able to accept that I'm wrong, to be able to accept being told off, you know, if I do something wrong. One of the big differences that I found is in the Air Force, you're given feedback all the time. You're constantly being told what you're good at. And if you're not so good at something, you're being told as well, but in a constructive way. You get your midterms and you get your 6,000 of your SJARs, and you know, you're constantly getting that feedback and how to develop yourself. In Civvy Street, you don't really get that as much. You get your annual reports and bits and bobs, but that's a big miss for me, I think. I think sometimes I'm looking for some sort of feedback. Am I doing this right? So that's a difference. Other skills is just being able to be open-minded, and everybody's different and everybody's got a story. Because in the Air Force, you never posted to somebody like 20 of you. Everybody's got their own story. Everybody's different. Not everybody in this world is going to get on, but you've all got something to bring to the table. And it's that in the classroom as well. You know, 30 kids that are in the classroom can be completely different, but they've all got something to bring to the table. And it's making that team work and making them recognise that they are a little team.
And it seems to me that the Kristy-Jo that left on the train age 16 would have been a very different woman now if you hadn't been in the Air Force. Is that true?
Oh, definitely.
I only realised that it probably you'd still be a joker and you'd blah blah blah. But imagine there's bits, yeah.
Yeah, I took some time off when I was in Northern Ireland, and I went backpacking around the world on my own. But the Air Force had given me the confidence to walk in a room on my own, to sit in a restaurant by myself, you know, just pick up a book on the beach and read. It made me comfortable in my own space as well as with other people. And I think if I hadn't joined the Air Force, I would never have done that. I would never have the confidence to do that. I wouldn't know the line as well. Like I said before, I very quickly learned the line between what's a bit of banter and a bit of humour and what's inappropriate.
Yeah.
No, and I think if I'd just been in the civilian world, because I wouldn't have had anybody to put me straight, I could have been crossing loads of lines. Yeah. So
I've had quite a million trillion comments from people laughing at your stories. So that which is fabulous. And yeah. We've also had some questions. So have you taken the learnings from feedback and used it in your teaching? So I guess the feedback you had, I think this means the feedback that you had during the Air Force, some of those kind of adjustments to how you approach things, have you then learned that or used that in your teaching?
Yeah, and certainly some of the feedback styles that I've had through having different leaders sort of every 6 months to a year in the Air Force, a lot of their leadership styles, I've used those to influence how I am. So the way I might speak to child A to give them feedback on a GCSE style question would be completely different to how I'd speak to child B. And I sort of almost focus in on how I've been fed back to in the past, and you know, pitched it by knowing the audience. And I think again in the Air Force, having different SACs, you always pitch it to, you might have one that's a bit of a crier and one that's all she has. So you deal with them different, and that's helped me working with teenagers.
And another one, what was your most challenging experience moving from the RAF to Civvy Street?
A lot. This might sound quite trivial, but a lot of people get my name wrong. So a lot of people call me Kirsty, and it doesn't bother me, I answer. But when people say, oh, you used to be in the army. No, never been in the army. No. That, for me, it was getting people to understand that the military is not all the same, and don't judge us all as a group. You know, when I was applying for my teacher training places, I had schools saying, oh, we've had bad experience of working with soldiers. I'm like, well, that wasn't me though. That, you know, don't tar us all with the same brush. So that was quite difficult, getting people to understand that, you know, not all the military is the same.
Yeah.
And we don't just all like shout and scream. And the kids at school know that if I raise my voice, it's got to that point. You know, but there's been other ex-forces teachers who are quite well known for shouting and things, because that's the style that works for them. You know, so it's horses for courses, if you like.
So what, oh gosh, there's loads here. I think we're going to run out of time. What do you, oh, sorry, no, the way you talk sounds like you'd be a great leader. If you've got chance, I mean, obviously you were a leader already as a sergeant. If you got chance, would you have progressed in the Air Force? Yes. Like I said, the first few years, I just messed around, and I know I did. I'm quite reflective on that, and I should have knuckled down a little bit more. I probably relied too much on the other SACs carrying me a little bit. But then, like I say, I realised, and it kind of put the fire in my belly. And when I got my sergeant, I thought, actually, you know, I could achieve more. I could go all the way with this. And if it hadn't been for personal circumstances, then I would have wanted to continue and carry on. You know, I've often thought about joining back up, because I'm still young enough, so I can still go back in. But my body's had it now; it's ready for the scrapyard. I'm sure not. I'm sure not. Okay, let's move quickly on from that one. What's your one learning that you'd want your kids to take away from your experiences? You mentioned resilience earlier in terms of your resilience when you're teaching them, and just that, like I said, it was a drunken person in the bar at Kinloss who said to me, "Don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't do that." And that stuck with me. She also said as well, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. And those two things have been a life lesson. I have had some rough times in the Air Force, but I've taken away every opportunity to learn from those rather than sit dwelling on them. That's not my style. Some people prefer to do that, you know, reflect back in different ways. But my personal style is, I've got through it. I can do this. You know, I can achieve things. And looking back, and I've still got my blue file that you get in the Air Force that you put all your achievements in and what have you. And if I am having a down day, you know, I'm not ashamed to admit, I'll get that file out and I'll look back and I think, I did some amazing things. I can do this. I can get through this. So I want to instill that in my kids and my school kids as well. Yeah. So to me, that sounds like the perfect inspirational moment to end on, because I'm sure, you know, I take stuff away from that. I'm going to be remembering that when I get onto my next task today. So thank you. And it was, you know, really fascinating to hear not just kind of the interesting things that you've done during your Air Force career and afterwards, but really interesting to see the effect that the Air Force has had on you as a person. And you obviously, you know, you're obviously hugely glad you were in the Air Force, and it sounds like you miss it a tiny bit sometimes. Yeah. But I think you're a member of the WAF branch, aren't you now? Yeah, and that has really helped me as well. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, like the transition to becoming a civvy, being part of the branch, and, you know, again, just throwing myself in. And some of the ladies in the branch, you know, they won't mind me saying, you know, they've got sort of 40 years on me. But we get on so well, and we've had experiences like the Tower of London, where we went there, and our AGMs are always an absolute hoot. With different things that we've done, dining in nights at Linton, and because we're a virtual branch, we are all over the country, and there is kind of always somebody nearby, somebody that you can, you know, just have a bit of a chinwag with, or a bit of a phone call, even like just a little daft text message just to see if you're all right. You know, the branch has helped loads. I feel a bit bad now. I should have mentioned them earlier. No, not at all. Have helped. Well, I'm going to end with my traditional, hopefully everyone else at home is raising coffee cups. So I'm going to toast you, Kristy-Jo Hockaday, and say, in a very American way, I'm going to say thank you so much for your service to our country, not just your service in the Air Force, but the service you're giving now as a teacher. Hugely important roles, both of them, and thanks so much for sparing the time today to spend some time with us and tell us about it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening. Thanks so much, Kristy. Everyone's doing their thumbs up, look.